Okay, everybody. So, hi, everybody, and welcome back to Faith Brunel's Insights. I'm Faith Brunel, and today we have Karen Bailey with us. Hi, Karen. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Morning. How are you?
Morning. I'm well, thank you. Thank you very much. So, I just want to
Good.
welcome all of the listeners back to season six. This is actually season six and episode two. So, Karen, you're episode two of season six. So, we're kicking off today with a wonderful and remarkable woman, Karen Bailey. So, Karen, I'll hand over to you briefly before I have several questions that I'd love to ask you this morning, almost afternoon. So, actually, can you introduce yourself to the listeners, please?
Yeah, I'm Karen Bailey and I'm Principal Solicitor of Bailey Wright and Co Solicitors. It's an award-winning firm that's been going for 27 years now. We specialise in education, employment and children law, but also do discrimination and public law, which is kind of human rights type law around those areas as well.
Thank you very much, Karen, for your very interesting content. It's very thorough as well. I'm just jotting those down to see if I can think of any questions. I know I gave you the questions before, but what I love to do is think of a question that you don't know of, so I can just kind of ask you that today on the day. Excuse me. So can you, for those who don't understand what a principal solicitor is, could you just explain that for them?
What it means is that I effectively own the firm.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm obviously a solicitor and I don't have any other partners. So although I have employees, it's me that has the responsibility for the firm.
Wonderful, Karen. Thank you very much for just clearing that up for anyone who wasn't too sure about that kind of that phrase. So just getting into the questions then, your establishment of Bailey Wright and Co., which you mentioned in your context from the outset of today's episode, really marked a significant milestone as the first African Caribbean woman to set up a practice in the Birmingham city centre. So how has this journey helped, really impacted your approach to law, and what drives your commitment to specialising in cases involving social services and child-related matters?
So, well, I was a partner in a firm before I decided it was time to set up on my own after a lot of encouragement. And one of the drivers was a poster that I've still got on my wall from Malcolm X that my mom gave me. And it says, to be truly free, we must first create our own economy and agree to work towards its development for the good of us all.
Yeah.
So what that meant is we always sit around and say, oh, we need to be doing this as Black people and we need to be doing that. I thought, let me put my money where my mouth is and my time where my mouth is, and set up my own firm. And what I realised, having the space and not being within the confines of a different firm, was there is an artistry that I hadn't appreciated in the law, the ability to use it in a different way. So you can go along and you can do perfectly well, but by just following the law as it is. But the excitement comes in ways that you can use it creatively for the benefit of your clients. So you can bend and stretch it, you look for holes in it. So I had never thought we'd have reported cases. More cases are reported now, but cases used to get reported where you changed the law. And so we've had cases where that's happened. And so that was really exciting. When we first started, we did everything, because when I was training, that's how things worked. But now the areas of law that we specialise in, apart from mental health, which I would have liked to have done, are the areas that worked out to be my favourite areas of law.
Wow, okay.
So that's why I do
Excellent.
that. And my absolute favourite is children law.
Children law, yeah. Thank you, Karen, for really talking about that question. And actually, a question that you obviously that you haven't had today is, what advice would you give to to law students, aspiring barristers and solicitors who aren't really sure about which law they want to specialise in? What kind of tips would you give them to be able to kind of work out which one really suits them?
I think that you need to really try it as much as possible. I mean, when I was training, I was convinced I was going to be a brilliant criminal lawyer, and I was really excited about it. But then when I started doing criminal law, I realised it wasn't nearly as interesting most of the time as the cases that we read. It was kind of depressing, because there's a lot of really good people that for some reason are just going down the wrong path. And to see that waste was depressing. Some people are just horrible. And then there are people who get caught up in it, and you know, there's very little you can do. But when you're standing in court and your shoplifting case is behind another 6 shoplifting cases in the magistrate's court, and you've got to work out what you're going to say for your client that's not been said already by those in front of you, you realize that it's not that exciting. So
thank you, Karen, for that really just kind of that really realistic and really honest approach and response about, you know, being a solicitor and in criminal law, that it doesn't really change, you know, in terms of the case. As you said, you have to find something different to pull out that the judge hasn't hitherto heard from the other
but so sorry to kind of answer the question, which I didn't quite. That was my experience of saying, I want to do that. That's what I felt like I was going to do in university when I first started training. Having the experience made me realize, and in the olden days you used to get a lot of the opportunity to do a lot of different things and work it out, but it's kind of about seeing what bits you like best and finding what's going to fit with what you like doing
And just to piggyback off that question, in terms of work experience, so talk to us about how important do you think work experience is, and kind of coming off that question.
I think it's incredibly important. I mean, I got my journey, I've discovered law through doing work experience. I got my foot in the door at the place where I eventually trained and then became qualified and became a partner through doing work experience. So I made myself available because I wanted to. I was so interested. I kept going back to them in the holidays and things. So whatever opportunity, and try it in different places. We had a general firm back in the day, so I was able to get a lot of experience in the same place. But, you know, it's really important now to try and get it. And think about in-house. It doesn't always have to be in a firm. There are lots of different organisations that have in-house lawyers. So, you know, it's worth trying and applying to those kind of places as well. But it is important.
Great, wonderful, Karen. Thank you very much for talking about that, because I too really see the importance of work experience. It's something I'm always talking about, you know, with the listeners, with people that come across, that work experience is key. And another question that you haven't had, but you're doing great so far in terms of giving us the tips, so thank you. In terms of networking then, so obviously networking is very key, you know, in terms of the professional landscape. So how crucial was networking for yourself, you know, for really advancing your career?
Well, I suppose it was different for me because my way of networking was like getting in with the firm that I chose to be with, if you like. But I think nowadays it's really important. And I think, you know, it disappoints me sometimes when I go to networking events and you don't see, for example, many Black people going to events. You don't see many young people going to events. Yes, it's scary. Yes, it's horrible. Even after all these years, I can walk into a room full of lawyers and think, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? But it really is important to get to know people, because they're not as bad as you think, and you never know when you're going to make that connection that will be useful to you in the future. So it's really important. I mean, one of my solicitors I've got now is I found as a trainee at a networking event.
Wow, okay. So there you go, everybody. If you want to be, if you want to work with Karen, then maybe it would be wise to go to a few more networking events, because I know
you want to work with anyone. It is because you hear things, you learn things. You know, it's just a useful way, and also some of them are quite good, and a lot of them they're free. So who's going to turn down free food and drink?
Well, there you have it, everybody. There is also a secondary benefit of networking. It's also the cuisine, the food that you get upon arrival, and the canapes. But yeah, Karen, thank you. You know, as I said, if you want to work with Karen and others, this is a really good method. But I said Karen because obviously we have Karen here today, who is sharing her personal insights and her personal journey. And Karen, indeed, you mentioned a key word that's key to the Faith of Brunel Insights brand, which is journey, because our mantra is, it's not an event, it's a journey, and your journey can begin now. So that is something that we definitely embody here, you know, through this kind of podcast business, through the podcast as a whole. So let me kind of segue now into some of the questions that you did actually have in advance. So as a member of the Law Society Children Panel, your focus on cases involving care proceedings and adoption is pivotal. Can you shed some light on the complexities and challenges in this area of law? and how your expertise aids families navigating such sensitive legal matters.
Okay. Well, first of all, as I said, it's my privilege to, that's my favourite subject, and it's a privilege for me to work with people at really one of the most horrible times in their life, which is the possibility that they may lose a child if you're dealing with public law proceedings, which are cases against involving the local authority, or private law proceedings, which are between parents or family members in relation to a child. And obviously that conflict can be incredibly painful. And so you hear things, you know, people have to trust you with their biggest secrets and at the most difficult time in their lives. And it's about how you can apply your understanding of the system, your knowledge of the law, to help them achieve what they need to achieve. But one of the reasons why I like children law as opposed to other types of litigation is there is one focus. It's the interests of the child. So whereas in other kinds of proceedings, you just do whatever your client says, and you still have to do what your client says. But at the end of the day, if you've got a client that is saying that they want to do something that really is not in the child's interests, or is not going to work for the child, you have to give them the advice that is just not going to go anywhere. And it's about steering them to make decisions, if they aren't doing it already, that are in the child's best interest. So although people might come from different viewpoints in a case, which is why it's litigation, they've still got to look at what the child's best interests are. And so that's why I like it, because that's what you're focusing on, the children.
That's very interesting, and that's a very compelling case for why why you should actually undertake this type of law. It actually sounds very, very interesting, very impactful on the children's life as well, which I find very interesting.
It's so interesting. And sometimes, despite the difficulties that we face, it's wonderful to make a real difference. Sometimes you can reunite children with their families, where it might have started off not looking like that was how it was going to go, or when it's clear that children can't return to be with their families. It's good to be able to give them the best option instead.
The next best option for their situation. Well, Karen, that sounds really interesting, and I can really understand your passion. I can see your passion through your mannerisms and through the way that you explain each case. It really sounds very interesting. So thank you for coming on the Faith Brunel, the Insights podcast, just to talk about your excellent journey and kind of talk about why you chose this particular type of law. I have no doubt that it will give a lot of law students a lot of clarity now in terms of in terms of choosing and deciding what type of law that they wish to specialize in. So over the years, you've witnessed shifts in the legal landscape. How do you see the future of family law evolving, especially concerning social services, care proceedings, and the rights of children in care? What changes or advancements do you anticipate in this realm of law?
Well, one thing is that social services, social services generally, but children's services are ridiculously underfunded. So everybody that deals with it in the family justice system, as I call it, because that's the end I see it from, is they're under a lot of stress and pressure and stretching things out. And like for years, people have been getting, oh, it's going down, it's getting worse and stuff. But then you look back on, say, 20 years ago, and like that was luxury, the things that you could get done compared to now. The focus now is more on crisis and risk management as opposed to supporting parents in the system generally. And that's because of funding. So things like Sure Start, which were a great thing
I remember
for
that.
supporting families, got closed down. So the level of support, what's expected, it's really difficult for families to access it. There are a lot more pressures on families generally with the cost of living crisis. A lot of people get in the system purely because of the pressures caused by poverty, really. And so resources needs to change. They need to look at more prevention rather than it getting to the crisis point. And they try things, but if they're not properly resourced, then they're not going to work. So I think we're going to be heading for a complete look in a few years' time. They're talking about it. They're always doing changes. to try and make things better.
Mm-hmm.
But until you kind of get that planning backed by the resources that social services need,
there won't be
it's
any
increasingly
longevity.
depressing. I mean, a huge thing is like deprivation of liberty of young people, which is basically when they get put in secure accommodation for their own safety.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to go out. That is needed, or is it a lot? But there aren't the places. So what are you supposed to do when you really need to keep a young person safe and you've got nowhere realistic to put them? And the options, you know, a lot of young people suffering from mental health. I know it sounds really depressing. A lot of young people suffering from mental health, ill health, and there's the waiting list for therapy and so forth.
Yeah, it's very long. Yeah.
And instead, what frustrates me sometimes is instead of people saying, come on, this cannot work, we need these things, people keep cutting their coat according to their clock. And soon you won't have a coat that will fit a baby if you keep doing that. But I'm hoping there are things that are still making a difference.
Yes, so the glimmer of hope, yes, which is good.
So I'm hoping
that
things will continue to improve, like FDAT, which is the Family Drug and Alcohol Court, has a holistic way of working with parents that seems to be getting a lot of success. The question is whether or not it will be backed by funding.
Well, Karen, thank you very much for really being honest with us today and talking to us about some of the challenges, some of the pitfalls as well in terms of the underfunding and kind of how you see this kind of sector going forward. Thank you, obviously, for sharing about your wonderful and inspirational journey. I just want to kind of segue into your involvement in issues such as the Care Standards Tribunal and the Disclosure and Barring Service, which people also know, people know as DBS, which highlights a broader scope of legal advocacy. So could you share some insights into the importance of representation in these areas and the impact it has on individuals' lives?
Okay, so with the Care Standards Tribunal, that's usually, we'll do that with foster care, sometimes with foster carers and also with say like people who run nurseries and things. They have difficulties, and of course, as far as that's concerned, they don't have the right representation. They could lose their livelihoods and everything that they've been working towards. So, you know, again, it's about you advise them as to where they can improve things, make them do the improvements, and support them in representing them to put their case, and hopefully to enable them to keep their businesses if that's what it is they've come to you for. The Disclosure and Barring Service can also be for parents who we've represented, or people who have had something in the past that's come up on there and is again affecting their chances of getting the job that they want. So it's possible that sometimes things are there that when you look at it, put it in context, look at the timescales, that you can put forward, make representations that can get that information removed, and therefore give them the opportunity to get the job that they're looking for.
Well, Karen, thank you very much again for coming on to the Faith Brunel Insights podcast and talking about that, which is really important in terms of looking at representation and making sure that people have access to those avenues of representation, which is really important and really key. So thank you. And just finally, really, how can the listeners get in touch with you after the show is ended today?
Well, if they wanted to, my email is Karen@BaileyWright.com. I have to say that if people are going to be emailing for work experience, that we're not going to be even thinking about taking on new people until sometime in the new year, because I've got to bed in a new person first that I'm going to be taking on. One of the things that I wanted to say about us that I didn't say in the introduction is our firm's motto is where the underdog comes first.
Yeah, I saw that on the website.
Important. Yeah, no matter how small you are, everybody needs some backing, and so we're pleased to be able to provide that.
Thank you very much, Karen. And thank you very much to my listeners once again for joining me on the Faith Brunel Insights podcast. This is season 6, episode 2 with Faith Brunel and Karen Bailey. Thank you very much. And everybody, I hope you have a very wonderful and productive week today. I know later on I'm going to be going out to sell some products as part of Faith Brunel Insights. So thank you everybody for coming along and for watching. If you've watched today or if you've listened, and whichever podcast platform you're on, remember it's not an event, it's a journey, and your journey can begin now. This is your host, Faith Brunel Pommel, and I'm signing off. Bye.